Today's lecture goes as follows. We spend a lot of time, maybe most of our time, um, uh, flexing our muscles in the direction of predicting, this is the key word, the evolution of design in space. In space. We dealt with simple things such as the cross sections of ducts. From there to tree-shaped architectures, a few other things. You have notes. I hope you took your notes. And we kind of followed this textbook design with constructal theory. The turn in the narrative, which happens today, experienced a preview during the preceding lecture when I showed you how to, or why not to be surprised by the fact that some images are more attractive. Those have this shape, which resembles the so-called divine proportion or golden ratio. The physics of attractiveness has to do with the fact that this kind of image is perceived, meaning scanned completely, faster. And you see, faster in the scanning, faster has to do, in accordance with the analysis that I put on the blackboard, has to do with a design that has evolved in time. In time, scanning requires time, and so unlike in the past, which was about the evolution of design in space, today's lecture is about evolution of design in time. In other words, in space, we're spatial. Is okay, but it is much more powerful as a thought when combined hand in glove with evolution in time or temporal. So that's today's new topic, and I will introduce you to this, I would say, very familiar material by asking you to think about yourselves. Life itself, in fact, if you think about your own body, is not only a drawing or a piece of still art, but something that pulsates. It functions or flows rhythmically. What flows inside the body is that way. The body itself obviously goes through this daily cycle, and just use your imagination. And the first challenge, which I will face in your company today, is to predict the most obvious, which is the rhythm of respiration. I would add that the topics that begin today and will continue during the next lecture are not from the DC3 book. They are from the textbook that I wrote in year 2000 called Shape and Structure from Engineering to Nature. Oh, no space. Shape. Published in 2000. You don't need the book. You need to take notes today or watch this video. Well, respiration, meaning the challenge of predicting it. Incidentally, you cannot solve a problem unless you know how to pose the question, or the questions if more than one. And the questions that will will very soon will become the punchlines to this lecture are why does inhaling and exhaling take the same time? Why? Inhaling, I'll call it time T1, is the same as T2. So that's inhaling and exhaling. Pretty simple. Why are these time intervals? Obviously, it's only one interval because we'll prove that they should be the same time interval. Why are they characteristic to the animal? And one way to answer that question is by answering another question, which is why shorter time scale when running? You've all done physical exercise, if not competitive athletics. You know about that. Well, incidentally, if we crack this nut of respiration, the solution to the other puzzle, which is heart beating, is the same. Follows from the same exercise. So I will not repeat this for blood circulation. Anyway, so that's the the puzzle, and the first one today, respiration. It begins with the simplest drawing imaginable, which is a drawing of the lung. This is the trachea, and then down here is the lobes of the lung and the thorax. The structure, it's dendritic. That's not the object anymore, meaning it's old news. And during inhaling, with that is atmospheric air with average velocity u1, because we're talking about inhaling, which is the time interval t1. A certain amount of external air is sucked into the thorax. The thorax enlarges in volume to a new volume greater by the increment capital V. So capital V is the volume change during inhaling. You can practice on yourselves, if you don't believe my model. When you're inhaling, you look bigger, all right? And all this, if outside the temperature is P0, T0, then for the inhaling to take place, the muscles of the thorax must be pulling the rib cage laterally. So in order to create a partial vacuum inside the lung, meaning a pressure that's P0 minus delta P1. Delta P1 is the so-called partial vacuum during inhaling. And then finally, external air flows in, clearly, because outside the pressure is greater than inside. It flows in without getting out of control, because this entire flow structure poses a resistance to the flowing. And that feature I sketch or account for in terms of a global flow resistance called lowercase r. What do I mean by that? I mean that delta P1, the pressure difference is actually equal to this flow resistance times the average velocity u1 to an exponent n. And in chapter 3 of the DCT book, you saw that the relationship between pressure difference and flow rate. Depends on the flow regime. If the flow regime is laminar, then this n is equal to 1. If it is the regime is turbulent, n is equal to 2. When we're splitting hair at this stage, we call it lowercase n, because all the lessons are worth keeping but not repeating. You see that? So it takes a pressure difference to overcome a flow resistance to allow this ambient air to flow in. And then what follows is exercise, meaning invocation of principles that we have invoked in the past. So we're talking about what happens during inhaling, which is the time interval t between 0 and t1. What happens is that a particular mass of external air becomes an internal mass, as I'll write next. So the total inflow of atmospheric air is rho 0, which is the density of the air outside, and then U1, and then AF is the cross section of this trachea, or whatever, the effective cross section invaded by U1, and then U1 to power n. This mass of external air is the same as the mass accumulated inside the lung, which is rho 1, and then the volume increment capital V. At this stage, I'll let you write these things down. So this is the conservation of mass. At this stage, I will, because look, life is short. Simpler is better, at least in the very beginning of the journey. I make the assumption, yeah?
No, why do you have rho 1? What is rho 1?
Yeah, because inside the lung, the air is warmer than outside. And I was just making the assumption that the difference between the two densities is not that great. And I'll assume that there's just one rho in the analysis. All right. Well, very soon we'll let's say, be wise and honest enough to pay attention to the fact that to push this or to suck this air in requires work from the animal, from the thorax muscles. Work is also required, more obviously, during exhaling. So exhaling during the interval T2 is the same sort of picture, but changing in the other direction, meaning we have the trachea, and now the big volume called whatever is shrinking to the initial volume and shrinking by the amount capital V. It does so because of an excess pressure inside the lung called delta P2, excess relative to the pressure outside, which is P0. Flowing across the same resistance called R and cross-sectional, or through the same cross-sectional area called A sub F, F from flow or frontal, is the exhaled air, which is of average velocity U2. And so we write mass conservation one more time. We write it as This time, rho 1, U2, AF, T2 must be the same as rho 1, V. So the mass of air that was inside the volume becomes the mass of air that has been expelled.
Why do you have rho 1 on both sides?
Because the density here, rho 1, is the same as the density of the exhaled air.
And what does the T2 do?
T2 is the duration of exhaling.
Why is that equation, why is the first equation doesn't have T2? Then why
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot to write it down. That's why. Thank you. Yes. I was so much into interesting. Yeah, actually, there was a mistake here. This is T1. Okay. Thank you, Jack. All right. At this stage, we have two equations, namely equation 1 for inhaling, equation 2 for exhaling. If we divide the two, we obtain something that will be useful later, which is that U1 T1 divided by U2 T2 should be over order 1. So we keep this kind of intermediate conclusion to ourselves. What matters, in fact, you saw this during the study of animal locomotion. What matters is animal effort lifetime, and in this case, effort that's made all the time by the breathing animal is the effort of, enlarging the thorax and then compressing it, like the movement of half of the accordion. You see. By the way, the what do you call that? The wrinkled volume of the accordion that goes up, back and forth. There's a name for it. Those people who know music. The accordion has two parts, and the player pulls them rhythmically this way, but in between them there is a compressible air space, which, when you do this, blows air through the vibrating parts of one side of it. It's just like the harmonica. The harmonica is you blow in one direction, but the blades are in that parallelepipedic piece that touch your lips. Anyway, that piece is one of these, the one with the keyboard. You never played with this instrument? You have? No? It's a really nice one. Sorry, if you have friends who know how to play it. I grew up with those types. I was not at all good, but they were. All right, anyway, that is man-made lung, back and forth. All right. So, but it requires work to do this. What is that work? Work from the point of view of the living is it's calculated with that famous formula: work equals the integral of PdV. In this case, there are two parts to the cycle. There's a delta P1 times V plus a delta P2 times V again. And after you substitute into this expression the model for delta P1 and delta P2, we have delta P1 already on the blackboard. Delta P2, did I write it? I did not write it. Delta P2 is correspondingly R, and then u2 to power n. After you do that, you get that the average power, meaning average per breathing cycle, which is this total W divided by T1 plus T2 equals this resistance factor, which doesn't change, and then this volume, capital V to power n plus 1 over the cross-section AF to power n. And then the interesting part, which is T1 to minus n plus T2 to minus n divided by the duration of the cycle. So this is the first result, the so-called half of the battle cry of victory. We have now an expression between the cost to the animal, in this case of spent power, with respect to how breathing is executed during the cycle T1 plus T2. The question is about how the animal would adjust these time intervals to live more easily. So here's the total power spent versus those degrees of freedom. Both of these T1 and T2 could vary. And if you look at T1 varying, it varies as shown in the numerator, raised to an exponent that's negative, meaning that the longer the inhaling time, the less the breathing animal has to spend. So this is the behavior with respect to T1. The behavior with respect to T2 is the same. And the message, which is kind of like a slap in the face of Adrian here, is that the smartest animal, to live more easily, would simply take one breath per lifetime, meaning take it in and then exhaling, because you see in that direction the average consumption of power goes to zero. Now, so the next question is why the message to increase these intervals to infinity is false. And the reason in abstract terms is that the lung does not happen by itself. The lung is an organ, one organ, serving or being present because of the whole, for the whole. This is known as the holistic approach or point of view. The whole is the animal, the living body. And the living body, you know very well, is first and foremost an engine that is driven by an input of useful energy, and the engine aspect of the animal is normally not talked about in physics or biology, but we recognize that. And what drives the animal? What drives the animal is a process akin to combustion in the combustion chamber. That's called metabolism. And metabolism requires several flows into the body and one of them is the flow of oxygen-rich air. That is what goes into the body during inhaling, and it goes into and reaching the smallest spaces inside the lung, and those smallest spaces at the tips of the tiniest bronchioles are called alveoli. So here is the air coming in through one of those smallest bronchioles, and let's do a ramification to show you that everything is complicated. But at the very end of the smallest, there's a sac looking like this in profile called alveolus. So this is one alveolus. Alveolus is a Latin word for a small cavity. Small cavity. In other words, the the diminutive of the mother word, which is alveus. This is cavity. Kind of funny. You heard about cavity when you go to the dentist, right? You have, right? Well, there's a joke about that. It is a word in dentistry, alveolus, but doesn't refer to the cavity that comes from the decay of the tooth. The little cavity in the jaw in which the tooth is implanted is called alveolus. You see that? So the human body has two places full of these little cavities. I should probably say at least two places. The terminals of the pulmonary tree, and then the configuration of, if you look at it, a jaw without teeth. Get it? All right. And what happens in the alveolus? Well, during the inhaling time, so during T1, I'll make an alveolus that's shaped as a like the eyeball, a sphere. Air brought in brings oxygen, meaning inside the alveolus there is a concentration of oxygen that's higher than outside. Outside is the tissue. It looks amorphous tissue. The tissue of the lung, in fact, the lung itself is consumed traditionally in poor layers of society everywhere, but especially in Europe. And high concentration called, I didn't call it anything, but high concentration in the ball, low concentration outside the ball, drives a process of diffusion, meaning that oxygen diffuses into the wall to a thickness called delta. Delta. And this delta grows in time by diffusion. Every thickness penetrated by diffusion increases in time as square root of time. So this delta, from the theory of, in this case, mass diffusion, is the same as thermal diffusion. This delta, it grows as d, and then square root of time. D is the diffusion coefficient. It's a factor with the units of meter squared divided by second. This is all, you've all taken heat transfer here at Duke. Did they teach you elements of mass transfer? They're identical except for the change in notation. So thermal diffusion, in thermal diffusion, the formula is delta, the same as alpha squared root of T. All right, so this delta grows as d times the time to square root of time, meaning that the total mass of oxygen-rich air inhaled during time t1 is equal to the area of contact, I'll call it capital A, and then a factor called J, which is called mass flux, I'll explain it very soon, times T1. And the mass flux is defined as, this is the equivalent of the heat flux, means mass flow rate divided by the heat transfer area that's penetrated. So mass flux as the definition of D. Concentration difference between inside and outside. So this thing also means delta C. And then divided by delta. So when you put these two things together, you find that the total mass brought into the alveolus during the inhaling time is A, and then diffusion constant to power 1/2, concentration difference delta C, and then T1 to power 1/2. All right, so the function of the alveolus is to bring to the tissue oxygen. What is brought increases in time as square root of the inhaling time. Let's make a sketch of that. So here is the inhaling time, and here is this mass of oxygen brought in during T1. Well, clearly, it increases at a decreasing rate. This is a lesson, I think you've had it before in this course. Every time you encounter a diffusion process, thermal diffusion, in this case mass diffusion, you have to be very careful. The nature of the process is that it is highly efficient shortly after the start, but soon enough it becomes famously useless. And there's this behavior that tells the animal design to stop it, meaning finite T1 and starting again is a better design. And so intermittency or rhythm is born at this stage, meaning inhaling should be of finite duration, will have to be followed by exhaling, which means cleaning the cavity to get it ready for the next inhaling interval. It's also known as surface renewal. Everything in life is about not just easier flowing, but also smarter in time renewal of surfaces that otherwise would become clogged up. So don't be mad at yourself when you cough. That is what happens during coughing. It's helpful. It's useful. You are well, obviously you've heard of the expression clearing your throat. All that is good for you. Okay, so now we know the origin of intermittency, and finally, of course, is better said with a clean blackboard. Important part is the total mass of oxygen brought in during one cycle. This would be the quantity to maximize through the selection of rhythm. And it turns out, after you combine those two parts, that this thing is proportional to the group T1 to 1/2 because oxygen comes in during inhaling, not during exhaling, divided by T1 plus T2. And this group for the persistence of the animal is required, meaning the animal requires this much fuel, in this case oxidant, not fuel, oxidant, per unit time. And I'll call it capital K. Capital K is in this case, the constraint that connects the exhaling to the inhaling time. And so what's left, this is the constraint. What's left is to minimize the consumption of power for flexing the thorax muscles. So next, minimize the average power spent, subject to fixed capital K. And in this operation, you have only one degree of freedom, which is either T1 or T2. And you can do this even without the Lagrange multiplier method. You can definitely do it with the intersection of asymptotes, and you get the result that, so result is that T1, after this, let's go to optimization. Remember, optimization means the operation of selecting. To optimize doesn't mean to pinpoint the maximum or the minimum or the best. It means to be in the business of making a wise selection. And the wise selection is of two kinds: to know what the best is, but also to know that it is wise not to split hairs. Anyway, the so-called selectable or optimal should be the same as T2. It is at this trade-off between the two that the consumption of power from the muscles is minimal. Not only that, but you also discover that these two time intervals that have the same order of magnitude, they're nearly equal. You can measure your own breathing time versus exhaling time, which is, by the way, what I did after I got this result. I said, wait a minute, let me check, Adrian. Are you like any other cat that of course, obeys the Constructal law? And sure enough, you can do this on yourselves. It's about 4 or 5 seconds here and 4 or 5 seconds here in people. Anyway, the scale of this time interval varies as capital K to minus 2. We'll get to the meaning of this capital K. In other words, if meaning the conclusion is high K means short T1 and T2, or high K means frequent breathing. Well, I erased the definition of K. The definition of K had to do with the rate of oxygen intake per cycle. So high K means high requirement of oxygen intake. Well, that happens during physical exercise. And you know that when you are running, you breathe more frequently.